Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this video we'll be talking about how to create variables in Python. Now variables are easily one of the most essential parts of any programming language. They allow us to store and manipulate data. And in Python making variables is incredibly simple. All you need is a name and a value. For example, I can make a variable called x and I can set x equal to 5. So if I were to then go ahead and print x, you would see that I would get an output. Let's say this as variables. Yes, you'll see that I will get an output of 5. And that's because x equals 5. Cool, so I can also change x, so I could go print x, and I could then change x to make x equal to 10. And then if I print x again, you'd see that we now get 10 instead of 5. 5, 10. And so that's that. Now, there are different types of variables, and the three main types in Python are integers, which are also called ints for short, and these are just whole numbers like 1, 5, 0, and negative numbers. We also have floats, which is a fancy way to say decimals. And the last type we have is text. And in programming, text is called string. And just an example, here's an integer. Variable a could be equal to 5, and this is an integer because 5 is not a decimal. I can also make a float. B could be, I don't know, 3.1415. This is a float because it is a decimal. And I can also have text or a string. For example, C could be equal to, in quotation marks, hello world. And the quotation marks are important because the quotation marks tell the program that this is text and not a number. Without quotation marks, it is impossible to tell whether hello is a word or a variable. Therefore, quotation marks are essential when you have text. And there we go. So now we can also manipulate these numbers and by changing them and adding them together. For example, I could print out A plus B. And if I hit run, you see that we get 8.1415, which is indeed A plus B. Now, an interesting question is, what if I want to add text and numbers together? So you'd think that I could do C plus B, right? However, when you run this, you will get an error. And here's why. Python cannot add numbers and text together. It can add floats and integers together, but it cannot add any form of number and text together. So to compensate, we have to change this number into text. So to change B into text, or a string, we put str, short for string, and then parenthesis, b, end parenthesis. And this will change b into a string. So now if I run this, you'll see that we don't get an error. Instead, we get hello world 3.1415. And this also works in reverse. For example, let's say I have a new variable and I have it x, and x could be equal to text 5. Well, this is great, but what if I want this to be the number 5, not text 5? Well, we can also do it in reverse. We could print out a plus int 5. Say int x, and this will change x into an integer. So if I hit run again, you'll see that this works and we get 10 because 5 plus 5 is 10. So cool. We can also manipulate numbers individually. For example, I could have x equal to 1. And if I could change it, if let's say I want to add 2 to x, I can make x plus equals 1. And this will, oopsies, and this will add 1 to x. I can also subtract 1 in the exact same fashion. Let's say I would subtract 2 from x. I could do x minus equals 2. This will subtract 2 from x. I can also multiply x by 5 maybe. And of course, x asterisk equals 5. This will multiply x by 5. And you can already figure out how to divide. To divide x by 5 is the exact opposite, x slash equals 5. And this will divide x by 5. So that is how you change variables individually. You can also add variables together to make a new variable. For example, I get a variable called part1, and that could be equal to 1. I have a variable called part2. This could be equal to 4. And I can find a variable called x, and x could be equal to part1 plus part2. If I were to go ahead and print x, you'd see that I would get 5 because part1 is 1 and part2 is 4, and 1 plus 4 is 5. Great, so now let's talk about how to get input. Let's say I want to have the person running the program give us a number to use. So for this we have a very nifty function called the input function. So all I do is write input, oopsies, input, parenthesis, and an optional thing is ask the question. So I can say name a number. If I hit run, you'll see that it indeed asks us to name a number. And I don't know, let's put number 4. And as you can see, that's all it does. And we can go ahead and we can have it print out x. And you'll see that when I run this, if I put a number 4, it'll print out 4. Great, so one thing to note, if I then print out x, you'll see that x has quotation marks. X is text because input is always in the form of text, but we don't want this to be text. We want this to be a number. So let's change it into a float. So float, just like that. And this will store x as a number, not as text. So now we can print x again. You'd see that if I do that, I get 4.0. I do x again, you see there are no quotes now. It is a number 4.0. So now let's finish this off by creating a program that can do Newton's second law. If you don't know, Newton's second law is that force is mass times acceleration. So pick a new variable, we'll call it mass. And let's make mass, we can change the question to, what is the mass of the object? And we can also add another one, and we'll make this acceleration. We can make this equal to, once again, float, because we want a number. We can ask this time, what is the acceleration of the object? Cool, and now, again, the variable is called force, and force is equal to mass times acceleration. And finally, we can print out the force on the object is, and then add force. And remember that we have to convert force into text, so we'll just do string force, just like that. Also important to notice my space right here, because without the space, the plus sign does not add a space. So if I run that without the space, you'd see that if I just do 1 and 1, there is no space between the is and the 1. So we need that extra space right there just to make sure it looks correct. But now, let's set the mass to, I don't know, 5 grams, and we can do acceleration of 1 meter a second, and the force of the object is 5.0. And that is it for today. Hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for next week's video.